Hello students, welcome back to the second lecture of our preliminaries chapter. So in the first lecture, we set up a notation and we also saw the statement of the well ordering principle, as well as we saw a simple example where we applied the well ordering principle. Now let us ask a few questions about the well ordering principle. So, I had mentioned earlier, if you remember, well ordering principle states that if I have a set which satisfies two conditions, and the two conditions are the set has to be non-empty and it should be a subset of the non-negative integers. It could also be a subset of just the natural numbers. So if I have a a set which satisfies these two conditions, then in this set there will have to be the least element. A good question to ask at this stage will be, why should the set be non-empty? So what do you think would really happen if the set is empty? Well, if S is empty, then since it has no elements, there is no question of smallest element or greatest element. So you need to have at least some element inside the set to be able to decide whether it can have a least element or otherwise. Also, it should not have, if it does not have any negative integers, it feels intuitively obvious that it should have the least element. If it is not intuitively obvious, just give it a thought. What would happen if we would allow negative integers also inside this set? So for example, suppose I take this set -3, -2, -1, 0, 1 and 2. So dot 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 on this side means I also have negative integers like -4, -5 and so on. This does not stop anywhere. So notice that this is a non-empty set, but in this set I have allowed negative integers. Now obviously this set is not going to have the least element, because if I allow negative integers like that, then there is no least negative integer as such. So it should, if it is a subset of non-negative integers, then things are going to work out. So that is why intuitively it is obvious that if a set is not empty, it has at least one element and it is a subset of the non-negative integers, then it's going to have the least element. What I want you all to think about is what would happen if instead of taking non-negative integers, I would keep the first condition as it is, but I change the second condition to set of non-positive integers. That means I allow 0 and I allow negative integers now. I do not allow positive integers inside the set. So pause your video for a moment and see if you can somehow restate the well ordering principle in such a way that the second condition is that S contains non-positive integers. So if I were to change this condition where I do not allow positive integers inside the set, then I could say that this set will have the greatest element. But of course the well ordering principle is used in this particular form. So to summarize, if I have a set which satisfies two conditions, it should be non-empty and it should be a subset of either non-negative integers or it should be a subset of the positive integers, that means the set of natural numbers. So if these two conditions are satisfied, then well ordering principle guarantees that this set will have the least element. So this, as I mentioned, is going to be a very important principle that we will be using in algebra. The other important theorem that you have studied in the first year class, which we will be using again fairly often, is what we call as the division algorithm. Now before I give you the statement of division algorithm, let's look at a very simple exercise. So what I want you all to do is, let me give you the number A as say 36, and let me take b as 5. And I ask you to divide a by b the way you would have learnt in school and give me a quotient and a remainder. Well, I'm sure most of you will end up doing this. So then, if I divide 36 by 5, my quotient is 7 and remainder is equal to 1. But what if I want to do the arithmetic slightly differently? What if I do 5 6s? Well, in that case, my quotient is going to be 6. My remainder is going to be 6. And well, there is really no stopping me. I could as well do 5 5s are 25. Get 5 as the quotient, 11 as the remainder. You can continue that way. 5, you can take 4 as your quotient and so on. On the other hand, you can also do something like this. Now here, you get minus 4 as remainder, 8 as your quotient. You could also take 9 as your quotient and continue. But then what's going to happen? Something as simple as division and obtaining quotient and remainder, if done differently, could give us for the same pair, it could give us different quotients and it could give us different remainders. So we will not even be able to agree upon our quotients and remainders for a particular pair. So if I do not want this kind of chaos, I do not want this kind of confusion, I want uniqueness for the quotient and the remainder, then I put some conditions on the remainder. The first thing that we all decide is, it's not a very good idea to have a negative remainder. So we leave out this case. And out of all these, so the first condition that I put is, I do not want a negative remainder, and so all these are out, then the ones which will give me a negative remainder. But now look at these possible remainders, 1, 6, 11. Out of all these, I would like to keep a remainder as small as possible. And notice that this remainder is smaller than the number that we are dividing with. This remainder on the other hand is not smaller than 5. So we decide to keep the remainder as small as possible, and it happens to be smaller than the number that we are dividing with. So if I put this condition that this has to be smaller than b, right now I am saying b because in this case b is positive. We will see very soon what will happen if b is negative. So if I put these two conditions on my remainder, then all these cases are out. And notice that the only remainder, the only quotient for and remainder that I'll get for this pair is quotient equal to 7, remainder equal to 1. And now this ensures uniqueness. Let us see whether I would get the same thing if I would change the values slightly. So in this case for 36 and 5, I had got my quotient as 7 and remainder as 1. And remember, what are the conditions that we insisted on the remainder? It should not be negative, and in some sense, it should be smaller than the number that we are dividing with. So now, if I take this as my first example, let me take A as minus 36 and B as 5. And now I want to get a quotient and a remainder which will satisfy. I put these conditions on the remainder. I want the remainder to be non-negative and it should be smaller than the number that we are dividing with. So let's quickly do this arithmetic. Well, what do I take as the quotient? You can pause the video here and see if you can come up with a remainder that will satisfy this condition. So let's try 5 into minus 8. 5 into minus 8 will give me minus 40, and when I subtract, this becomes plus 40, which gives me the remainder as 4, which is perfectly fine with me because the remainder is not negative and it is smaller than the number that I am dividing with. So in this case, I get my quotient as minus 8 and I get my remainder as 4. And notice that as long as I keep these two conditions in mind for the remainder, there is exactly one quotient and one remainder that I'll get for this particular pair. Before I go over to the third example, also notice that A can be written as B times Q plus R. You can quickly check that. B times Q will be minus 40 plus R plus 4, that is minus 36. Okay. So that is as far as A being positive or negative goes. Let us see now what happens if B is negative. So let me take A to be 36, B to be minus 5. Now, when I say that I want a non-negative remainder, that is still okay. But I can no longer say that R is smaller than B. But I can still say R is smaller than B in inverted commas. But what do I mean by smaller than B? In some sense, the size of the remainder should be smaller than the size of the number that I am dividing with. And by size, what I mean is you look at the modulus of the number that we are dividing with. Modulus of minus 5, by the way, is plus 5. So I am now looking for a remainder which is going to be less than 5. And let's work it out. I think minus 5 into minus 7 will give me 35. So it gives me quotient as minus 7, remainder as 1. And check again whether A can be written as B times Q plus R. So definitely this can be done. And you can check whether it also works when I take A as minus 36 and B as minus 5. If you want, it's a very simple exercise, but if you want, you can again pause the video and check for yourselves whether you come up with a value of Q and R, and that should be unique for this particular pair if I keep these two conditions in mind. So what have we really learned from these easy exercises that I did? It simply tells me that if I give you any two integers, A and B, positive, negative, I have taken all kinds of combinations. So if I give you two integers and I ask you to divide one by the other, of course the other one should not be 0, then there is a way by which you can divide. You will get a quotient, you will get a remainder. But if you want, if you put this condition on these two conditions on the remainder, namely that the remainder should not be negative and it should be smaller than the number that we are dividing with in some sense, then the quotient as well as the remainder are both unique. So this is precisely the essence of division algorithm. And this is going to prove to be very important to us. We will formalize these ideas into the statement of division algorithm in our next lecture. That will be all for now. Thank you.